We are live, I take it.
We're good. We're good to go.
Okay. Are we live now?
Yes.
Okay, I guess we can proceed. I didn't hear the starting gun. This is the July 23rd meeting of the Utilities Committee of Glendale. The meeting will begin with review of the minutes. Well, first of all, I guess I need to say, do we have a quorum? And since there are three members and Marilyn and myself are here, that does make a quorum, I believe. So let me ask if we can review the minutes from the last meeting of May the 8th, excuse me. Are there any questions or revisions to that?
Mr. Chair, I move adoption of the minutes.
Oh, good. Thank you. I second it. So I guess it's passed unanimously with those present. The agenda you have in front of you, I believe, and David, if you might show it in case for any future reference, I guess, if you will, please. Begins with, I'd like to acknowledge several things, one of which primarily is the very good results of the review of the contaminants. And I guess they're kind of a plastic, it sounds very much like a fluoride of some sort, but there were none found in the production of our water. And Kevin, you might really quickly tell us a little bit about what they are so we might understand. That which was not there, is not in our water.
So it is kind of like a plastic. I got to look a little more into it. It's kind of a new issue that's coming along with the EPA. We actually tested for it a couple years ago on our own and found 0 results, undetectable. And then this has actually been contracted this past time here by the EPA themselves. They did all the sampling. They came on site and took it all and came back again undetectable. So looks pretty good for us.
That's great. That's obviously good news because there are many people who are worried about our water. Wally, if you take a moment and maybe update us as you have done so well in the newsletters, but with the replacement of the main, please.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Rack and Valier started just over a week ago. They made exceptionally good progress in putting in the new 10-inch poly main alongside cast iron metal main. And they're doing so while the road is closed, which I think has probably doubled their schedule. They're past Morris. They're now working on the town hall side, coming down the tracks, then they'll bore under the tracks. That's going very well.
Yeah, and that's great. Also, just for the record, the water plant in Evendale has been greatly enhanced with the coat of paint. It looks a heck of a lot better. And it was something that was long overdue, and it is well done. Moving on to the other topics, the primary concern I have, and we're sure we all have, is that the utilities department operates at a loss. And it does not appear that that loss is going to get any smaller over the near term and potentially could continue to increase over the long term. If you would, David, please put up that chart. If you take a look at the chart, and everyone should have a copy of that. We have seen it before, but it
Excuse me,
illustrates.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
could
yes.
you please explain what you mean by operates at a loss?
Taking the cost of operations against our revenue, we have a negative result. And there are some numbers that I provided you, I believe, with the package you received. But it is, we do not bring enough revenue in to cover our costs, is what it nets out to.
Okay, I'm not sure I agree with that, because we have 4 different funds out of which we make expenditures. Some are capital, some are maintenance. And so when we say it operates at a loss, we can't lose money. The only place we can get money for the utilities is the enterprise fund, and that's financed out of our billings. And if we have to raise rates, tell us, but for now, we are managing through it.
Okay. I'm sorry, I don't know who's speaking.
This is Don Lofty.
Oh, okay, Don, I can't see you on my screen.
Oh.
If you would, David, there's a second page with some numbers on it.
That second page was not included in the electronic copy that you sent to me.
It was not.
No.
Okay. It should have been. All right.
Jeff,
Yes.
is this the page which reads annual unit numbers, water produced and water billed?
Yes. And the second set of numbers on the page say annual P&L. Those numbers are taken from the sheet provided me that has been used for a number of years, which shows the revenues, the expenses of operation, and the costs of retiring our debts. And those numbers, as you can see, the revenue, if you look at the columns starting at 2014, the left-hand column on the page begins with 2014 and goes through 2020 estimate. And I guess, Don, if you're saying that when we are retiring debt, is that not an expense?
All I'm saying, I don't have the page that you're referring to right now.
Okay.
I have a packet that was given to me when I walked into Wally's office. I don't remember getting it. I don't think I got it by email or anything. So I don't know what numbers we're talking about now.
Okay, well, these are simply the total revenue reported on an annual basis on a report given to me, and it is also the same report that is used by environmental engineering to recommend that we increase rates. And actually, if we go back and look at the environmental engineering proposal presented to us back in the fall, they also indicated that our costs would exceed our income for the next few years without raising the rates.
That's correct. And we decided to make our rate increase lower than would be necessary to bridge the gap in order to avoid imposing a sudden burden on our ratepayers. But we have a plan, and our plan is to get even. So if you're saying now we are operating a loss, now I understand what you're saying, yes. But we have a plan in place with a series of rate increases that will get us back to even.
I understand. Effectively, we're running a business, and the business is not making money, and we can pass the cost on to our customers, and we're in a different type of business. Our customers would say, I'm not buying from you anymore. I'm going to go to a competitor, and I will buy from them. Well, our customers are locked to us, so our responsibility is to deliver the water at the lowest possible lowest possible cost, while delivering a quality product. And yes, we could continue raising prices, and in fact, we are at the third of 4 price increases, and then starting in January, the rates will go up again. And the point being that we continue to lose money, and there are options that we can implement and need to implement to cut our costs. And we're not going to end up making a profit, but we'll get to a break-even point more quickly.
Okay, I think we're coming around to agreement here, Jeff,
Okay.
because I do agree with you that we should be looking. What's wrong? Oh, okay. I do absolutely agree with you that we should always be looking for ways to reduce our costs. And so if that's what we're talking about, I'm fine with that. But what I wanted to, we're not supposed to make a profit here. We're supposed
No.
And so, the idea of we're not really running a business in the sense that we have shareholders who look to us to turn a profit. We are trying, as you say, to provide the best product we can at the lowest feasible cost. And so let's continue with the discussion of how we can reduce our costs, and I'm all for that.
Okay, very good.
Jeff,
Yes.
yes, I'd like you to, if you don't mind, and if you have that information handy, the dollars that you show in the annual profit and loss in your spreadsheet that you've passed out for this meeting, where you have revenues going back to 2014, expenses going back to 2014. I'd like you to once again tell us how the dollars you've shown here, particularly in the year 2020, compare to the dollars that we as a committee were discussing at the October meeting when we did the budget for this calendar year. And we were looking at the rate increases that went into effect in January and the automatic rate increase that goes into effect in January of 2021. Today, we're looking at a loss, as you said. But back in October, we were looking at a slight profit. And I'm struggling here to reconcile how it is we are looking at a loss now, but not then. And I'm also struggling to find out if we are looking at all of the expenses, as Don just mentioned a few minutes ago, if we're looking at the entire line items for the enterprise.
We're looking at the report, as I said, that was provided to environmental engineering and on which they based their recommendations. And this report has been accumulated since 2009. The numbers you're looking at on the sheet that you have headed annual P&L simply show that in some years we've had a loss, and others obviously we've broken even or covered a little excess and put away something into reserves. But if I may, before we pursue that too far, I'd like you to look at the chart that's on the display, and you have a copy in your hand. There are four things shown there. There is one which is the amount of water billed, and that's showed by the blue line, I believe. And I apologize, I just had a shot in my eye, and it's a little blurry. The black line is the total gallons of water, and this is in gallons on your chart. Total gallons of water that are produced or pumped, if you will, but Kevin has to clarify and treat that water so it's actually produced into a product. The black line shows that the total number of gallons produced, as I said. The red line is the difference in that we actually produce 100% more than we can sell, or we only sell 50% of what we produce. And that's been going on for years, as you can see in the graph that's been provided. So the fact is that in producing that water, it costs about $200,000 a year, and that is our numbers are provided again by Kevin, and they are accurate. And if we are if we are losing, not throwing, if we are losing half of our processed water, pumped water, then the 200,000 plus cost to produce that water, half of it is lost. And so if we can reduce that cost, reduce the amount of water thrown, we will reduce, obviously, our losses. And although we may not, we don't want to get to a profit, but what we'd like to do is be able to keep more of what we earn on the sale of water. On that chart, I've added one additional green line since the last time you saw it, and that is simply a reference to the amount of wastewater that Kevin has to handle. The 300 million gallons of wastewater are labeled as an estimate. That's based on an average and some and guessing what 2020 will be. But as you can see, that the black line is the amount of water we produce, that we pump. The green line is the amount of water that is processed as wastewater. And that is something else that is a challenge for the village, that because it is it must be processed before putting into the creek. The cost of doing that is relatively small, as I think I've noted, that because it's just the power to run the pumps primarily, it doesn't require a great deal of chemical treatment, but it does occupy resources. So the green line was simply added there to show you the relationship between the black line, what we pump, and the green line, what must be pumped to dispose of it. So the point then, in summary, I guess, would be that we need to find a way to reduce our lost value, lost cost, from the fact we cannot bill for all the water. There is one other sheet, I think. David, would you bring that up, please? Thank you. Specifically, what I was speaking of, if we look at water, our 10-year average is we lose about 70 million gallons, plus or minus a million here and there. Some of it is used for the backwash at the wastewater plant. Some, pardon me, the total number is a little higher, but some of that is used for backwash. Some of it is used by the fire department to flush hydrants, etc. I think the cost, as I said just a moment ago, the unbilled water is over 100,000 a year. And in 10 years, obviously, that's $1 million. Our 3-year average operating loss and using the 220 estimate is about $92,000. That's the average. This year, according to the numbers I've been provided, is going to be significantly higher. You know, what are the causes? As we know, there's the main line, which is a section is being replaced. Could there be leaks in the water line between the plant and Chester Road where the new line will begin? That's a possibility, those leaks. There are leaks in the delivery line, and that means the line going from the connection at the box to your house, between the box and the household meter. Maybe there are leaks we don't know about that aren't being recorded. And then, of course, the fact that, as expressed in our last meeting by Wally and by Environment Engineering, that our water meters are aging. They are, I believe, about 15 years old, as I understand it. The other issue, wastewater, real quickly, as I said, we cannot affect that greatly in terms of chemical or power costs, but it would be simply the cost of wear and tear on the pumps in the wastewater plant and other resources required. And the cause of that is termed I&I, and that's infiltration. Pardon me, Kevin. What am I missing here? I&I.
Inflow and infiltration.
Inflow. Thank you. Inflow and infiltration. So those are the causes. Now, you know, how can we address that? So there are several ways. There are a number of opportunities to affect that, and we spoke in the last meeting. Kevin, you, I think we're going to look at some quotes on replacing our older meters, our old water meters, with street read, remote read meters. I think you had some costs, I believe, at least some preliminary estimates.
Yes, that's correct. It was with Neptune, and it was in the neighborhood, I want to say, of about 450, close to 500,000.
Okay. So we're looking at 450,000 to 500,000 to replace those meters. And what would be our gain? Well, immediately you have a gain of labor savings, because we spend approximately 25 to 28,000 bucks a year simply to ask the guys to walk around the village, drive around the village, and read meters in the same manner that was done in 1930. So the meters would immediately cut labor costs and would also, we believe, reduce any error in billing, because meters are not reading, that we experience now, because the meters are not reading correctly. I think, Wally, you mentioned in the last meeting an estimate that we thought we were going to save by replacing meters the last time. It wasn't achieved, but there was some predicted improvement.
In 2004, when we replaced the old meters then, we expected, I think, a 15 to an 18% increase in accuracy or revenue. However, we received in the neighborhood of 6 to 7%. The meters were not as slow as we had thought they were, or that the manufacturer suggested they were. So this time, Mr. Bell has ordered a grouping of new meters, and he's in the process, he's received them now. He's in the process of going around the village and switching out people's meters with a new meter, and then we'll send the old meter to the factory that manufactured it and have the accuracy tested on it. I know that last year we tested the meter for resident. It was within specifications. but we'll do a larger sample and we'll get an idea of if we do buy new meters and remote meters at that, what would the savings be? Are the meters we have now accurate, or are they out of specification?
Excuse me, Jeff, you may have covered this in a previous meeting and I apologize. Can I just pause for a second and ask Kevin, is there an industry average for comparable systems to ours of loss of water, cost of processing? Is there, how do we compare to the industry?
We're a little unique. We're a little smaller than most. Pretty comparable is, I think, Lachlan. They're about the size of us. I think they just went remote read as well. I think they're in that kind of that ballpark with we were. I know Wyoming's pretty comparable, a little larger. Yeah, we're kind of the smaller than most.
I
Not really
believe
sure about all the
Maryland.
water loss. I don't know how much water loss they have. But I can find out by calling around the communities if you'd like.
The number quoted to us by environmental engineering was that the typical or the range that most water companies experience is 15 to 20% loss of their production.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
And Jeff,
Yeah.
that's also the range that I recall also.
Okay. So the first step, one of the steps is that if the meters are already 15 years old, we are ultimately going to have to replace them anyway. So I would like to suggest that we consider not waiting to replace them, to look at the return on investment as soon as Kevin's tests can tell us whether the meters are severely impacting us or whether they're running well. But let's just say if there's a 10% improvement on our reading and we save labor and we're going to replace them ultimately, then why wait? It's going to have to happen sooner or later. And in the meantime, it may be costing us much more money than it has to.
Can I get in there a little bit here and say that, if you're looking at $500,000 divided by the 1,200 homes, you're right around $400 a home for a meter. Kevin, is that about right?
That would sound right, yes. From the math standpoint,
Now,
yes.
the meter is a responsibility of the property owner. Is that correct?
Ownership of the meter or to replace it? I'm sorry, not sure.
I mean, it's the property owner's responsibility to have a workable meter. Correct, Wally?
I can help with that. Initially, when a new home is built, the owner or the developer of the property buys the meter from us. And
Yes.
it is our responsibility to maintain it if something happens to it, unless it's damaged by them. So when we do replace them, it's at our cost, but the initial purchase is made by the owner. May I say something about replacing the meters, please?
Yeah.
Yes.
It is my recommendation that we wait to see what the meters test to find out if they are accurate or not. I realize there's a $30,000 to $35,000 manpower expense savings if we have remote reads per year. However, if we are replacing meters that are accurate, that's the only savings there is. If we determine in 5 years that those meters are now slowing down, you'll get more bang for your buck when you replace them. You'll be replacing meters that are in error 5 years from now or 6 years, whatever that may be. But the most important thing we can do right now is to do a series of random tests and have empirical data before we make this decision.
Jeff?
Yes.
I agree with what Wally was saying, and that's where my mind was. So I'm glad to hear it. But I'm also interested in random testing older homes, Kevin, versus the newer subdivisions, which were built say in the last 20 years, last 15 or 20 years, to see if there's much leakage in those water meters, or if those water meters need to be replaced. And I would hope not, but you never can tell. I'm concerned about wholesale replacing aging water meters that are 15 years or older. And so I was just wondering if that could be factored into your random testing, the older homes versus more recent subdivisions.
Yes, so the meters were all put in about 15 years ago. So the age of the home necessarily doesn't matter for the meter life, but we are doing testing at least the 15-year-old meters, not the houses that just went in Carruthers Pond 2 or 3 years ago. So we are testing at least the meters that are 15 years old.
Yeah.
So you're not, did you say you're not testing meters in Carruthers?
We're not testing any meter that is under the 15-year mark that when we first put them in.
Okay. What is the schedule for those tests, Cameron? How long does it take?
My goal is to have there's 12 meters tested by the end of this month. So that is our goal, unless, pending things going on with the water plant and different things like that. But that's the goal, is to have them tested and results back by August, first week of August in that area.
The test apparently does not have to run for a month to give you data.
No, they actually set this up on they have like I don't know, lack of a better term here, just they have a meter set and they run different flows of water through that meter and they write the test results in. It'd probably take them a few days to get the results back, depending on how busy they are.
Okay, I understand. I was thinking it was still on the residence line. Of course not. Okay. So we should be able to test. How many meters would you recommend are a good sample? 12 out of 1,000 is relatively small.
It is.
It is small, but each meter that we test, we have to pull the old meter and put a new one in place, and those meters are running at about 150 to 160 bucks a pop. So I don't know how many you want to really start replacing and how big of a sample spot you want, but it is a cost to us to do this.
Okay.
My initial thought as administrator was that we'd get the results back from the ones that we're doing. And if we see signs of inaccuracy, then we can do a secondary or possibly a third test.
Okay.
We're looking at about $1,800 for this first round of to test the 12.
Right, but we can go retrieve the new meters, then do it on another 12 houses. We'll put the meters that test accurately back in the house, and the new meters go out and do another set of testing.
So,
okay.
Jeff, along the same lines as you guys are going, I have a question, I guess, general question. Typically, you have programs that are replace at failure. So you wait until something fails and then you replace it. Or you put a program in place that is a preventive maintenance program, which says based on the life expectancy of a specific system, you are expected to replace that system after so many years, regardless of whether that system actually failed or did not fail. So you basically go in and you say, we are instituting a preventive major program for, in this case, water meters. And the plan is we expect to replace all the meters over a specific time frame. And the time frame starts on day 1, and we'll do so many every year. And you run into a specific cycle. So in the industry, that's how you maintain an operation, and you're not surprised with, replace at failure. Is there any possibilities of having, a program that has that built in that says for 1,000 homes, we expect to replace all the meters over a 5-year period, and, we put a plan in place to address that. I mean, those are the possibilities. I'm just throwing that out there.
Unfortunately, it would be expensive. It is expensive to replace them all at once, but I don't know that it's possible to consider replacing a 10 at a time or 100 at a time. I would assume once you start with the remote read that you would have to continue the program pretty consistently. Otherwise, you have half your, or a third, or 10% of your residents on remote read, and others still on the old manual system.
Well, can I kick in here? I think we're putting the horse before the cart here. The amount of water that we're losing has to be an I&I problem, and the meters might be reading off a little bit, or even not at all for some cases, but until we have a good handle on I&I, we're just kind of kicking it down the road. I think that I know you guys have been testing I&I for a long time, but you got to realize we've got pipes in the ground that are 100 years old, and if you got a little crack in the joint or a crack in the pipe, you're going to lose the water that you're pumping, either going in or going out. And if we're treating more water than we pump, it's coming in from the I&I. It's not coming in from meters on the houses. And I think we got to get a handle on our I&I throughout the entire village before we start replacing meters. Even though the meters are where we bill, we bill on the meters, but if we don't have a handle on I&I, we don't have a chance of solving the amount of money that we're spending, the 70 million gallons that we're treating above what we can pump. Does that make sense to anybody but me?
Well,
I don't think I&I gets into the water line. The water lines would be leaking outbound. If they were leaking inbound, the household owner would be complaining about the taste of their water.
I think I&I has to do with the wastewater leaving, and to Alan's point, there could be leaks in those pipes that we need to address. And the meter's not measuring any of the I&I, but we're obviously treating more wastewater than what's being produced. So we need to get a handle on that. The other thing, to Alan's point, if we're losing, a good portion of the water that we're pumping, some of that is going to be, like was said, the fire hydrants. And I'm sure there's a lot of loss when you open a fire hydrant. I don't know how much gets lost when we lose a water main and that thing sits there and leaks for an hour before we can get it addressed. But I think we're going to see a pretty good improvement when we finally replace this main underneath Sharon Road. If it's breaking that much, there's probably a lot of cracks in it. So that's number one. But then if we can, I'd like to see a test run on the meters, but I'd rather see us spend money to systematically go around and check. I understand there's a more sophisticated way to check for leaks than what we have. Some good equipment that can detect large leaks, but maybe we should invest in some checking for smaller leaks throughout this old plumbing. But I think our big gain is going to be in fixing the old aged cracked plumbing. And you're right, Jeff, the pressurized lines that are supplying water, the water's not getting in there. I mean, we just aced our exam. So yeah, but anything, the water's leaking out, and that's why we're pumping more than we're billing.
Right. The water, even though it's clean, you're pumping clean water onto the ground with a crack. It wouldn't go into the home. It would still be, you wouldn't get water coming in because you got pressure going out. So you can be dumping your clean water onto the ground without people knowing about it.
Yeah. So I think testing the meters, or some confined test of meters just to see how it goes, that's not a bad idea. But I'd like to see us invest in trying to investigate where some of these leaks are, some of the bigger leaks are.
Let me ask a quick question.
Jeff, I hate to jump in like that. I'm not even a committee member, but is that kind of where you're headed?
That is something that ultimately has to be done regardless, because if we were to assume that all of the leaks are because the main line is leaking or the primary supply lines, that neglects the 1,000 small lines, of which some proportion may be leaking consistently. So,
I agree.
yeah, we need to check for small leaks, certainly.
Let me ask a quick question. Wally may know this right offhand. One of the causes Jeff has identified is the leaking in the water main between Chester Road and the plant. And as I understand it, that's part of the repair that's underway right now. When is that estimated to be completed?
Well, maybe Kevin will jump in too, but are you referring to Chester Road to the water plant, the water main there, Marilyn?
The Sharon Road water main replacement.
Okay, well, that's a 45-day job, but they've gotten a real leg up on the work. The initial work of installing the plastic water main is near completion. Then they'll go back and they'll connect the water main to the curb stops with new lines. And then we'll check people's homes to see if they want to replace the lead line from the curb stop to their house. I think there's another 30 days left on that, but they will maintain traffic as they do the work.
So we're looking at the end of October, mid-September, Jeff, to see a real change in the water main on underlying Sharon Road, at least from, is that from the plant to Town Hall, or is that just from Chester to Town Hall?
The main we're replacing is the one that has habitual breaks throughout the years, which I might add are a significant contributor to water loss. We had 12 major breaks, and we cannot meter how much we lost. Moving along, and it's a good question, Marilyn, the main's being replaced from Chester Road to the Town Hall at 80 East Sharon. The main from Chester Road to the water plant, and I'm knocking on wood right now, has not broken, but we are going to pressure test it time provided to see if there are some leaks. If there are some leaks, we'll bring a company in to tell us where that leak is, and we'll dig it down and fix it.
Okay, so my point in asking that, Jeff, is to at least clear in my mind the sequence of events. We're looking at hopefully addressing major leaks, as Wally described it, between now and mid-September by this water main replacement project.
We would expect that line is a part of the problem, yes, if not all of it.
And we're also looking at sequentially again, Kevin testing 12 meters in July or mid-August for to see if they're leaking or what's going on at the houses with aging water mains. So I think that what I'm getting at is that by mid-September, we should have some empirical data, provided again that, as Mike was saying, we have the equipment, the modern equipment, to actually do efficient testing for water leaks.
Well, I think, yes, as I understand it, we have some pretty advanced equipment to test major water leaks. We will still be faced with minor water leaks in the long run, those on the supply lines off the main lines. And then there is still the possibility that there is some water loss on the line from the plant to Chester Road. One of the actions that also was talked about in the last meeting was that pressure test, I think is the right term, Kevin, to see if there is loss from the plant to Chester Road. And I would like to suggest, put up for discussion or thought from Kevin, and is that when this process is complete, should we consider putting a meter at Chester Road to be able to measure the water between Chester Road and the plant consistently over the years, so that if that 110-year-old line were to pick up leaks that we cannot find, we might be able to tell that, at least get a clue if we had a meter that we could read accurately, as opposed to waiting for a pressure test. I propose that that's something that might
Put
be.
a mag meter there. You could put a mag meter there right before on Sharon, right before it splits off down Chester, because then you can pick up Chester and Sharon. But the pressure test should tell you if you have any leaks at that moment in time. Now, for future reference, if you want to keep an eye on that, then you could do that. But I would say just start with this pressure test and see if it should maintain pressure the entire time. You should not drop off any pressure at all off that main. And then we can just go from there. And I expect to have that pressure test done and the meters done my goal is to have it by August there.
Got it. And Meryl, to answer your question, we won't have empirical evidence until the meter reading that follows the completion of the line. And when's the next meter reading? October?
The next billing cycle is in October, covering July, August, and September. So I would say that the next reliable full quarter with the new main would be billed in January of 2021, covering October, November, and December.
Right. Okay. Because once the line's installed, Meryl, we have to wait for another meter reading, which will be 3 months. So that would be happening as early next year. I think we can't replace a few meters at a time. I guess we need to decide somewhere along the line just when does it become serious. If we find that a few meters are or are not leaking, how do we make a decision as to whether to pursue this? Regardless, we're still losing that 70 million gallons. So I don't want to simply surrender that thought. I think it needs more consideration and more discussion.
Jeff, I think that this committee ought to allow Kevin and Wally to do a decent data inspection and what have you, and form a kind of a battle plan on how we attack the entire program in the next year and a half or 2 years, so that we have good data instead of shotgunning data. We need to have something that says Wally and Kevin have decided this is how we attack this whole problem to solve it by a certain date, and we should set goals. And if you say the goal is to get that 100% overage on water down to 20%, that's something that I don't have any expertise in it except my own factory here, and you know, Kevin runs it every day. Wally's every day on it. They should have a pretty good handle on where that water is going. You know, there's on the wastewater. You know, when we treat 3 times the amount of water that we can pump. It's got to be coming into our pipes through cracks and holes and stuff like that. Well, the I&I needs to be. We had started doing it. I think Wally was doing it, smoking and what have you, and we need to finish that up. I mean, that we're losing so much money a year. We can spend a bunch of it to make it back, and that's something that you know. I mean, if we're losing unbilled water of $100,000 a year, let's spend 50 to find out where our 100's going, and we make that up in 3 years. So I don't know how we get to the a resolution of our problem without having Wally and Kevin decide how to do that. That makes sense to anybody?
Makes sense to me, Alan. And I think the other thing we need to consider is we can't automatically assume that it's a dollar for dollar.
No, you're right.
Because you've got so much of the costs are fixed costs. Now there are additional chemicals, additional power, additional things required to pump that extra water that we're not billing for, but it's not take your entire budget and divide it by that many gallons, because there's just so much necessary and fixed costs just to pump the first gallon, if you follow what I'm saying. So a little bit of a financial analysis is necessary too, to determine, you know, roughly, once you get past your fix, what are the variables left per gallon?
Mike, the number I use, the 200,000, is the cost of running the pumps. That is utilities,
Okay.
the cost of chemicals,
Uh-huh.
simply the cost of processing water. Does not include salaries or maintenance, et cetera.
So you've
That's
already got it kind of boiled down to what would be the variable per gallon.
right.
Okay, appreciate that. That's good.
So, yeah, I agree with Alan and Mike. I think we would all agree. Yeah, I am not an engineer. I don't know what should be done, but I think we need to put down a schedule with some benchmarks to say, okay, we will have it, and we've discussed it in part here. Kevin is going to start the tests. We'll have some data in August, and then how many more tests will we run? And can we get that done by the end of the year? Have at least some percentage of 1,000 homes measured, so we have an idea. Is it the water meters? And I would not necessarily claim that was the water meters myself. That was something that was said by our engineers, that could be part of the problem. So yes, I don't want to ignore that. We need.
Can I offer a suggestion? We have, and I want to thank you for the data that you've put before the committee. That provides us with some benchmarks, and I can leave it to, I'll defer to Wally and Kevin to pull out the benchmarks. But it seems to me that looking at mid-September, just before that October billing cycle starts, seems to make sense to me, rather than pushing for August. A lot of things could happen that could delay or push the deadline or the time frame back for what Kevin wants to get done. And the month of September gives us that flexibility before the new billing cycle starts. I would very much like to see what data Kevin and Wally have in September as of the end, you know, whatever date in September is convenient for them, rather than rushing for something in the middle or towards the end of August. So that we're looking at data on a billable cycle basis.
Understand.
Well, yeah, but also we have to remember, Kevin's got a full-time job.
Yeah.
And if you we're going to pile on his workload by changing his daily responsibilities and adding this to it, we really have to have Wally and Kevin sit down and decide how much time it's going to take from his daily responsibilities to get this data to us.
So, Mr. Chair, if I can offer just some points on budgets. So as I've listened to all the data and everything else, you're potentially talking about an opportunity cost of $200,000 a year when you incorporate wastewater losses and everything else associated with that. So it would almost be fair to basically give Kevin and Wally maybe the opportunity to come back to the committee and said, look, we have $200,000 a year that we're potentially losing. How much money do you need? How much help? And I'm saying that two ways. How much help? It could be bodies, it could be money to go after that. And that could be, you know, Kevin, Wally, you guys have an extra $50,000, or tell us how much do you need to go after that potential $200,000 loss that you see every year. That way, we're not tying Kevin and Wally's hands down to, well, you got to do all this and operate within your current constraint, which are implied by the budget and by the personnel that they have. This is just a suggestion. You know, in the business world, you would look this as an opportunity to regain $200,000. So how much money are you willing to put into it to try to maximize that? You know, I'm not saying you're going to regain $200,000 off the top of the head, but it's an opportunity. So
Yeah, but in 10 years, that's $2 million.
So I'm just offering that to the committee for
Not 10
you
million,
know,
2 million.
help for Kevin and for Wally, so that it's not just his time. He could hire whatever he feels or Wally feel they need to attack this thing in a proper manner.
Yeah, let me ask another question of Wally and Kevin. Does the Ohio or the Hamilton County Stormwater, do they have any people that can give us help? Wally?
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Hope. It's a different category, stormwater. They manage stormwater from buildings into the creeks, so that wouldn't help us at this point.
Okay.
When we have construction.
Well, but is the I'm going to go back to the I&I. Are the stormwater pipes dumping into the creek? Is that correct?
Yes, sir. All the stormwater pipes go to the nearest creek.
Okay, and then the creek water, our sewer pipes, are under the creek. Is that correct? Most cases.
In one area I'm aware of, in the Warwick area, there's a sewer pipe through the creek. Yes.
Okay. Well, to me, that probably is where our problem is, on the treating more water than we pump. If that creek runs all the time and we've got a crack in it, it doesn't take a big crack to make add a lot of water into the treatment plant. I think that Mike is right that we need to not micromanage Wally and Kevin and let them come up with a decent plan on how to attack it, and let's just set up a long-term idea on how we solve this in the next year and a half or 2 years, and get it down to as low as we can get it and go from there. I mean, we can always make improvements. There's no doubt about it.
And I think that could even be contracting with a company that specializes in, say, finding these leaks.
Yeah, and there's also companies that will reline a sewer pipe, and you know, if you've got, I guess the only way to really see if there's water inflow into the sewer and to the water pipes is with cameras. To be honest with you, I guess there's other ways if you can test with pressure and that kind of stuff, but you know, the camera system works awfully well in homes, and I know it's expensive to do, but we're wasting a lot of money on our pipes. And I think the first thing is to see what Sharon Road comes up with, and see how much.
I agree.
See how much we stop there.
Yes.
I can't.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mike. I don't disagree with it. I am not anxious to spend $400,000 or $500,000 to replace meters, but I think ultimately, it's going to happen. And if we are only losing some percentage of our loss because of meters, then we need to decide how long to wait. And yes, I think I mentioned someplace that it will require additional resources, whether it's outside companies or scholars from UC, someone who specializes in this, but a plan needs to be set. And what time frame would you suggest? What are your suggestions? We say 2023 is what I had said in the last meeting. We can't just have it happen at 2023. We have to make some changes in the meantime. So do we look at 6 months? Do we look at some of the actions that Wally and Kevin are already taking, we'll know in very shortly. So if we review those at the next committee meeting, we can make a decision as to what actions to move on very shortly. That is within the next few months, not next few years.
Yeah, I agree. I think, but I think you ought to leave it up to Wally and Kevin to decide, to let them give us advice on when they can get this kind of stuff done.
Agreed.
I'm very pleased that the village is in the midst of this Sharon Road water main replacement project. That is a huge project, and I'm very, very anxious to hear the results of that. And I think we're going in the right direction. We're not going to get there all at once, but I think the Sharon Road water main replacement project, I think what Kevin was talking about, putting that meter at Chester Road to test for the pressure between the water plant and Chester Road. And I think the random testing of the aging meters will give us a little bit more that we can work on and act with, Jeff. And I'm pleased that these actions are being taken. I think the I&I problem is another thing that we'll have to spend more time with, especially the infiltration through the creek water that Alan was speaking of. That's all I'll say at this point.
Okay, well, let's then agree to say that at the next, let's say by the September committee meeting, if not one sooner, that we will have a plan of action that we can review and set some schedules regarding the replacement of the main, replacement of the meters, and there's a couple of other topics that I'd like to address now that aren't included in long-term plans. And that is, we are losing, we have to spend more than we take in. And there are some places where we might be able to cut our costs. One of them, I hesitate. I have not in the past paid my water bill using a credit card, simply because I'm aware that it costs the village money if I pay with a credit card, and I benefit by getting some airline points. I asked David for those numbers, and he very kindly provided them to me. And right now, we spend $5,000 a year so that people can enjoy getting airline flight credits. That is the fee that the village is charged by the card processing company. You may recall in the past that you couldn't use an American Express card in some places because the owner of the business was being charged for it. Well, that's true. We are charged, again, a total of about $5,000 a year. And my question is how the committee feels about whether we shouldn't impose a fee for using a credit card, just as the county does when you pay your taxes. If you recall recently, you could pay in your credit card, but it would cost you 2.5% or 3.5%.
Mr. Basemith, if I can offer some background on that as well.
Yes.
Back in 2016, I believe it was, we renegotiated, actually changed vendors for credit card processing. We were paying close to, if not over, double that amount on an annual basis for credit card processing. So we're now down to about $5,400 was the amount last year. And those amounts are set by that contract that we pay with Infotech is the company that we use. They were very competitive compared to other providers. any arrangements about airline miles or anything like that, it's between the bank and the customer. We realized, I did a little bit more digging. We realized about 25% of our utility accounts are paid by credit cards. I haven't taken the time to go through past transactions prior to taking credit cards, but I would venture to say that we experience an uptick in the amount of accounts that are paid, or at least payments being made, because we do accept credit cards. I was trying to think of another point and it fell out of my head. I can't remember what it was. I'm sure it'll come back to me.
You're too young for that, David.
You'd be surprised. But I think that on the whole, credit cards have been a real benefit for our processing of utility payments and providing folks many options to pay their bills.
David, I do recall those contract negotiations and the competitive bids and the selection of the vendor that we currently have. And I continue to appreciate our teamwork on that. Do you recall when that contract expires?
I would have to read through the original agreement. I believe it was a 2-year agreement that automatically renews on an annual basis. I believe it was annual basis. Like I said, it's been a while since I've actually read the meat of the contract. If we wanted to pursue other processor options to see if we can get that rate lowered, that's always an option. But I would have to see what is out there now. Obviously, it's been about 5 years since we.
5 years, correct, yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, as I'm hearing what you're saying is, you're not saying to eliminate the use of credit card. You're just suggesting that the cost be passed on to the user, just like other organizations do today.
That was what I was attempting to say.
Yeah, and as well, and the reason I provided what I provided was to express that it brings a little concern forward that if we do that, we might discourage credit card use, which would ultimately negatively affect the number of paid utility accounts on a quarterly basis.
Okay.
I think statistics would prove that people will still use a credit card because it extends their payment and their opportunity to continue to enjoy that benefit. So that's just a.
That's true. The $5,400 that we pay in credit card processing fees are something that are part of our operations budget for the enterprise accounts. So those are currently already budgeted and appropriated for annually and are paid for through the water rate increases and water rates that are billed quarterly as well. So those amounts are already being included into what people are paying with their water and sewer bills.
So the credit card users are being subsidized by the non-credit card users in the village then?
For the fraction of a dollar that it ends up being, yes.
So, Mr. Chair, David put his finger on it. For the fraction of the dollar that we're talking about, $5,000, are there other cost reducing possibilities that you would want us to consider? Having reduced the expense of processing payments from $11,000 to $12,000 4 and a half years ago, down to a little over $5,000 today in this year. I'm not moved to view this as a major cost-saving matter to shift to the subscribers. I'm interested in hearing other suggestions that will allow us to reduce our costs.
Well, again, the issue is not, we're not saying you cannot use a credit card. We're simply saying, like the county or any other organization, if you want to use it, we're going to charge you a processing fee.
I get that. I get that. I understand that. I understand that. But what I'm asking for, are there other cost-saving possibilities, expense-saving possibilities?
There are a couple of other issues that I will address and hopefully keep it in the next allowed time. And that is one of the issues is our dependence on, I think the number I got from David, correct me if I'm wrong, David said about 50, or maybe it's Kevin, 15% of our 1,050 meters are estimated or read by the resident, which
those were estimates. Read by the residents are counted as actual reads.
Oh.
So the 15% are estimated readings. Any others, we refer to them here in the office as real reads. That being that we have an actual number from the water meter as opposed to the computer generating an estimated bill.
Well, we have some issues with accurate reads, and the process, I think, needs to be reviewed. I'm aware of a couple of reads which were significantly wrong to the amount of $10,000 error, and that happens. But I suspect that out of 1,000 meters, that there are some that are also not being read accurately, and perhaps it's in our favor, perhaps it's not. But I think that
if I can provide some more background on that as well.
Yes.
Yes, that is something that we're contending with. We've taken several steps already to make sure that we get, again, as I refer to them, real reads. The first of these is we are enforcing under our ordinances. We have the authority to pursue disconnection if we do not receive an actual reading after several estimated reads. Of course, we take several steps to notify residents of the steps they need to take to provide us with the real reading. Additionally, we have a lot more avenues to submit readings to the village. Our website has an online meter reading tool. We've ordered new meter cards that are distributed by Kevin and his employees as they read water meters that residents can fill out and return. They can submit their reading online through our website. They can also take a photo of their meter and text those readings to a village employee so that we have those real readings more frequently. I don't have the data in front of me as far as what kind of an impact that's had, but as we go through and try to correct those long-term estimates, yep, there are accounts that are, I'll say, overdue for a real read, and we're working to correct those as we encounter them.
Okay, so there's action being taken already?
Yes.
Okay, and how long do you think it will take before we've reached 100% of those needed to be reached? I mean, is that a project that's a one-year project, et cetera?
I mean, like anything else, 100% compliance is great, but it's not necessarily feasible. It's something that's an ongoing process. Accounts are, even we could have real reads for one account for years on years and then have several estimated readings for no reason. So we have to pursue them as they appear. It's not really something that it's not work that ever stops or is ever complete. But I think we've come across a few accounts that have been estimated for some time that are real readings are collected, and that helps us to adjust our billing records as well as what revenue we receive from water billing.
So if I understand you correctly, then we should have a real read for each meter at least once a year. A photograph.
Yes. Whether that's a photograph of the meter, a card turned into the office, a reading called into the office, utility department employee reading the meter, however they want to submit it to the office, as long as we have an actual number as opposed to relying on our computer and billing software to generate a reading.
Let me add, Mr. Basemith, this is Walter Cordes, that we are required to get 2 actual readings per year, and we're going to pursue that, no matter what the means that even threatening to shut off water if we can't get it. We have to stick to it.
Okay.
And if we get more than 2 estimations in a year, a person will have a leak in their house and not be aware of it. We wouldn't be aware of it. Thus, a very large bill when we finally get to actual readings. So, per ordinance and under the administrative rules, we are going to get 2 actual readings in 1 fiscal year.
Okay. Good.
But Wally, what I'm hearing is that those quote actual readings may be done by the resident.
Yes, that's correct. They can send a photograph in, they can call us and read their meter to us. We can tell if they're giving us the right number by looking at the old number, so that's pretty obvious.
But if there's a systemic misread from the old number to the new number, et cetera, you've got a continuing misread.
Yeah.
How is that addressed?
Well, we're going to get 2 actual readings per year. Photographs are wonderful. David said the webpage now allows that. And of course, our people go to houses and get the majority of the reads. It's when people are on vacation and we're reading meters that we leave a card and ask them to take a picture or phone it back into us. So that's how we get their readings. But our computer does flag readings when they're high, so we're able to identify them, and we'll go out and get an actual reading again if we need to.
Let me ask a question for the community, for the house, for the subdivisions that have been built since the 1990s. How are those meters generally read?
Oh, that's a very good question, Ms. Duke. I want to say in 78, 79, early 1980, by ordinance of council, all meters shall be placed outside of all future homes. Therefore, every subdivision after 1980 has outside meters. Our people take their trucks out to the subdivision, get out and walk and pull in everyone's front yard and gets the meter reading physically.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Hearing none, then in summary, let's plan that in the September committee meeting that we have a plan or a progress report on where we stand with the meter evaluations that Kevin's performing, what the status is of the pressure read on the main from the plant to Chester, and perhaps some, I think, Kevin, you mentioned the other day that you get frequent offers to replace meters from the meter salesman coming by, the Fuller meter men. Perhaps you could take a few moments of those guys' time, a few moments of your own, to have them give you a rough estimate to see whether the 400,000 is common or whether there are some models that may be a little simpler, and whether that cost is, I think, the norm or maybe on the high side, but just have an idea of what the actual potential costs might be. The environmental engineer had said to us last meeting that the cost to replace them would be about 470,000. You're saying it may be 400 plus, but maybe there are some options we can consider. So I'd like to ask that that be part of some information provided in the September meeting.
Yep, I can make some calls, and when they stop in, I can get some quotes for you.
Have them stop by and buy you lunch.
By the way,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank Kevin Bell for being here. He's on vacation.
Oh, thank you, Kevin.
He's taking some time out of his vacation here. So, Kevin, thank you for doing that on short notice.
That is most foul.
Thank you, Kevin. I didn't.
problem at all.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Kevin. Oh,
You're welcome.
I also had an important day this week. I won't say what it was, but nevertheless, there were no meetings on that day, Kevin. And may I suggest you take that same stance When you're on vacation, you're on vacation. You're unavailable unless there's a water main break.
Okay. If there are no other comments, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, meeting adjourned. And thank you very much for your patience and time.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.